Today we are presenting Zero Trust Security by Color Tokens. Just a little of housekeeping. We have put everybody on mute before we get started. If you have any queries during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. I'll bring them up during the presentation, and also we have time for the presentations and questions at the end, actually. Right. So today we have a live demo session from a real-time lab with some really interesting use cases after this presentation. So let us have a quick look at what are the trends of cyber attacks in India. So you can see the slide, I believe. So look at the statistics here. You can see one of the very familiar example, Cosmos Bank, where hackers were able to siphon off almost 94 crore rupees from the bank accounts, and they were able to transfer this money to various foreign and domestic accounts. One of the other focus area is ITS, which is one of the among most vulnerable to attacks today. You can see ITS industries amongst one of the most vulnerable to attack. So what are the key security challenges today? So we can have a look at that. What are the key security challenges industry is facing today? Here you can see the present scenario. Applications are distributed across the DC and the cloud, and they have not confined anymore to the perimeter security. As the perimeter security is your first line of defense, most of the applications are distributed and they are not confined, and users are mobile. You can see that users access their application from anywhere, like they connect from anywhere, any network which is not actually protected by any perimeter. So at this kind of scenario, attack surface is larger. Now it is more larger than the traditional perimeter controlled single trust boundary kind of architecture or the dual trust what we follow today. So we can see that this kind of architecture is not going to protect the infrastructure. Organization use TLS to protect their communication to ensure data privacy, but the same SSL can be used to secure all the application data, whether it is legitimate or malicious. So it doesn't matter whether the application is malicious or legitimate. SSL can be used to secure all the communication. So hackers try to use the same to hide the attack payloads here. Perimeter security, we can see that perimeter security devices today are configured to decrypt the communication and to determine whether it is good or bad. But many of the tools today what we use either lacks the performance or the certificate management using the same become a major barrier for today. Because doing decryption takes a lot of toll on the devices actually. So here is the statistics. We can see that 41% of attacks is hidden in the SSL traffic itself. The next important challenge what we are facing here is the TTP used by the threat agents. These TTPs, tactics and techniques typically used by threat agents are continuously evolving, and it is becoming almost impossible at times to detect using any signature-based solutions as we can see today. One of the example can be like fileless malware, and this cannot be detected by any of the signature-based solutions as of today. In such a case, we can see that APTs are rising, and as of today, we know defense of such defense is not going to work, and defense has to succeed every time, and but attacker has to be successful only one time. This is a scenario what we are seeing here. We can see in the slide the different attack phases: the recon phase, the phishing, and the zero-day attack, the backdoor, and all that. So fileless malware kind of APTs are in rise, and we are not able to control them. So at this constantly changing scenario, what is the best way to address this? So with this introduction, let me turn the time over to Mr. Mukul.
Okay, so thank you, Sudesh, for this wonderful context setting. So, Sudesh very beautifully highlighted the key challenges and trends that we are seeing in the cybersecurity market as on today. Color Tokens, as a thought leader in the next generation of cybersecurity space, has identified a few key challenges based on discussions with our customers as well as industry stakeholders in the cybersecurity space. So one of the key problems that we have identified is a lack of visibility in the east-west traffic. Most of us in the call or in this webinar today, the cybersecurity decision makers and the associated stakeholders would agree that a majority of cybersecurity investments today are made on the perimeters, typically firewalls, which help you protect from the north-south traffic and give you some visibility in that sense, of north-south traffic. But then when it comes to east-west traffic visibility, your firewalls are not capable of giving you the granular visibility. Now think of it, a malicious malware can easily evade a traditional, perimeter defense and expand its foothold over a period of time on critical assets. And over a period of time, and this malicious malware will establish a CNC connection and exfiltrate a large volume of sensitive data from your organization. And sadly, your IT administrator will have absolutely no clue because there is near zero visibility to east-west traffic with traditional perimeter defense as on today. So that's a huge challenge. And to back up this claim, you should also look at what Poneman research said some time back, that a malicious malware can remain undetected in your network for as much as 150 days. That's a whooping 5 months. So just imagine the volume of data that can be extracted from your enterprise, and your IT administrator would not even know about it. The other challenge that we have identified is most of the organization today are either on their path of digital transformation or they are somewhere midway, and they are moving their existing workloads from on-premise bare metal data centers to cloud environments. And in such a state, what happens is there are a lot of applications which are also being moved to cloud. And there comes your technologies like CASB, which help you provide access in a secure manner or control the access to these cloud applications. So very quickly, because now you were a bare metal server shop and now you're moving to a digital transformation, you need multiple tools to get granular visibility. So moving on, the other challenge that we have identified is for organizations who have already invested in ACL VLAN kind of technologies for microsegmentation. What they are experiencing is a lack of control from a user standpoint. There is very little control that organizations today seem to have controlling user access to microsegmented applications. And these users, when they move to a remote location, they expand the attack surface. And to keep pace with the business today, you also need your supply chain partners, your external consultants and vendors to come in quickly and be able to access, your enterprise network and critical resources. So the challenges that we are seeing in traditional security, especially with perimeter defense in terms of firewall, is that there are a large number of misconfiguration errors that we see in firewalls. In fact, Gartner has a staggering statistic that over 95% of threats that bypass your traditional perimeter are due to misconfiguration errors. So you can only imagine the majority of investments that you have made on your perimeter, how effective they are today. The other challenge is with the large number of rules which needs to be defined in your ACLs and VLANs. And then again, there is a lack of visibility there. There is absolutely no way you can audit the security policies which you have defined for your ACLs and VLANs. And of course, there comes a huge cost. There is a huge security skill gap that we see in some of the technically advanced products like SIEM, where organizations are finding it really tough to keep pace and finding better return on their investments in the existing security solutions. So what is the solution to this problem? Well, the solution is that you need to take an approach of zero trust security. You need to have access defined, based on the principle of least privileges. You need to secure the network. You need to secure the workload. The workload could be sitting in your bare metal server inside your data center on premise, or it could be in the cloud. You need to ensure that your users are able to access critical applications securely, be it from your headquarters, your multiple campuses, or it could also be a remote user. And then there is increasing pressure from your compliance and regulatory environments. So your solution should be able to support your compliance requirements by producing the right reports to be compliant for these audits. Aside these four items, we also go ahead and protect the endpoints and special purpose terminals. Now, this is very interesting, but we are not going to be focusing much as a part of demo and webinar today. But just a quick one-liner here. When it comes to special purpose terminals, you have kiosk at the airports. For banks, there are ATMs. For healthcare industry, there are MRI machines, right? So all these special purpose terminals need to be protected, and Color Tokens has the solution and the right technology to do that today in a real, simple, and effective manner. And same with application security. So that being said, I'm going to take a quick pause here from the presentation, and I'm going to invite the showstopper of today, Venki Raju, who is going to cover two main use cases of DevSecOps as well as protecting APT type of attack using Color Tokens technology. So Venki, take it over.
Thanks, Mukul. Hope you can hear me. And thanks, Suresh, also for that excellent introduction. I'm going to be covering a couple of demos, as Mukul mentioned. And first, let me just go ahead. So in the first scenario for DevOps integration, I'm going to be actually doing a couple of things. The first is about the misconfiguration that Mukul talked about. And so Gartner had an interesting statistic, and just kind of reflect on that for a second. Let's say it's late one night, you're configuring your perimeter firewall, and you're not quite sure if you did everything correctly. But you just said, well, okay, I'll come back tomorrow or maybe the day after and, just finalize this. And you might think, well, nothing's going to happen in 24 hours. No big deal. But actually, you need to think again. I mean, today's world is so different. You're not just looking at, well, a couple of hackers on the other end of the planet maybe trying to hit you or something. But there's really a vast army of hackers, and they're actually being aided by things like botnets that are just hitting you constantly. So with that in mind, we're actually going to do an experiment today as part of this demo to see what would happen if you left a firewall misconfigured. And in our case, I'm just going to basically kind of leave it completely open. The other thing I'm going to be doing as part of this demo is also to show you how you can use Color Tokens and integrate it into your DevOps itself so that when your virtual machines are born, they are actually born with security, regardless of what the underlying infrastructure is doing. So basically the zero trust model, right? So even if your firewalls are down, you should still be able to function in a secure manner. So before we dive into the demo, let me just kind of give you set the stage for what we're going to do. I'm going to use a couple of clouds, one on AWS and one on Azure. So these are going to be my two data centers. And on AWS, I've set up a VPC with a couple of subnets. There's a public subnet facing the internet, and there's a private subnet where I'm going to put some interior facing resources. And on Azure, just for simplicity, I'm just going to put one public subnet and deploy some resources there. And the way I'm going to do this is using something called Terraform. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It's an infrastructure as code system that basically lets you plan and deploy your infrastructure, whether it's on a local data center or in the cloud, basically using code. And similar things like you could also do something similar with, say, Chef Puppet, Ansible, or perhaps even things like GPO. I'm using Terraform because it gives me the ability to control multiple types of clouds at once without using cloud-specific tooling. Now, what I'm going to be doing, and we're going to be doing this live, I'm going to run Terraform and basically provision or deploy 5 virtual machines, 3 of them on Amazon and 2 on Azure. And on Amazon, the top 2 that you see on the left side are actually going to be a pair of resources that form a CRM application based on an open source CRM called Sugar CRM. And the one at the bottom is just going to be a development web server that I'm going to throw in as well. And the web servers are obviously on the public subnet because I need to access them from the public internet, and the database server is on a protected private subnet with no public IP, and so it's basically non-accessible directly from the internet. On the Azure cloud, I'm just going to throw out a couple of web VMs. I'm just calling one of them a production server and the other one a development server. And what I'm going to do is, in terms of the misconfiguration that we talked about, I'm going to keep the firewalls open. So as you know, both AWS and Azure have built-in software-defined firewalls, the security group in AWS and the network security group in Azure. And in my Terraform script, I've basically kind of just left them wide open. Again, going back to what I said before, I want to run an experiment to see what would happen if I left my firewalls open for a brief interval of time. And what I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to demonstrate color tokens integrated into the DevOps as well. So when I deploy my VMs, I've actually coded in, Terraform is infrastructure as code. So I'm actually coded in the VMs to have the color tokens agent embedded into the VM. And taking it a step further, I'm actually going to put a couple of these servers on a microsegment, and that's going to be protected from the outside world. And in this case, you'll notice that the microsegment is actually straddling both the clouds. So again, it kind of shows you the power and flexibility of color tokens, where we are actually completely infrastructure agnostic and actually can span multiple data centers, public clouds, and so on, at the same time. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start the demo. Now, what I will do is after I set up Terraform and we have the VMs running, I will post the IP addresses on the chat window. So if you actually want to try and connect to these 4 servers, please feel free to do so. And I'll talk about later which servers you will be able to access and which ones you won't be able to access. So with that said, let's go ahead and actually start the deployment. I'm going to pull up Terraform here. So you can see a bunch of Terraform scripts, and I've also got some scripts that install the agent, which are actually called from within the Terraform script. So let's go ahead and kick this off. I'll just give it a couple of seconds to make sure that it's starting up properly. So this is Terraform talking to Azure, and another couple of seconds, I should probably start to see the AWS resources as well. Okay. Now, this takes about just about 2.5 minutes or so for all the 5 VMs to spin up. And so while it's doing that, let's go over to the color master, which is basically our console to the color tokens environment. And let me just refresh the screen so make sure I don't log out. And this is actually the inventory page where you can see all the resources that we've got color tokens agents on. Right now, it's empty. We're really starting from a clean slate. And once the Terraform script completes and we have our 5 resources coming on board, you should start to see them here. Now, I'd also like to touch upon the visualizer, which is a very powerful way for you to actually visualize your environment, including traffic. And so what we'll do is let's go to the visualizer. And what we do here is you'll eventually start to see the resources that we just deployed, but you can also group these resources to do things. For example, the network group basically lets you create groups of subnets. So for example, you may define a microsegment, and then you say, well, I want my partners to be able to access the microsegment. Or you may say, well, my microsegment needs access to AWS infrastructure. It needs access to Azure infrastructure. It may need access to operating system patches. For example, if I have Ubuntu VMs, I need access to the canonical web servers and so on. So for all of these systems, I can actually create groups of CIDRs or subnets, and so that's basically what you see on the screen. Now, the resource group here is basically our microsegment. So in our example, what I've done is I've actually created a microsegment called Partner Portal. And the whole idea here is that only my partners will be able to access these resources and nobody else. And this Partner Portal microsegment is exactly the same as what we saw here, so the microsegment that's in green. And the way you define policies is also really cool. Unlike, I'm sure you have experience with firewalls and other products, and it can be very tedious and cumbersome. With color tokens, it's as simple as basically dragging, selecting objects and dragging and dropping lines. And I've already predefined some policies here. And you can see here that there's a policy, the blue lines indicate policies, And there's a policy here that says that my partner networks can talk to the partner portal microsegment on port 80, which is going to be used for web traffic. And in this particular case, I've enabled SSH simply because I belong to the partner network and I need to access the servers to basically do housekeeping. And now, because my partner portal, microsegment has both Azure and AWS infrastructures, I need access to both of them. So I actually have a policy that allows the portal to talk to the Azure infrastructure, and it also allows me to talk to the AWS infrastructure. And in this particular example, all the VMs are actually stock Ubuntu VMs. So I do need access to the Ubuntu servers just for things like NTP, Ubuntu patches, and so on. And I can go back to the visualizer here and actually show you the definition of these as well. So if you look at the partner networks, you see a couple of subnets here. One subnet is actually our offices in Santa Clara, and the other one is the IP address from where I'm currently logging on now, so I can actually run Terraform and provision these systems. And here's an example of what the Azure infrastructure looks like. So at a minimum, any VM on Azure basically needs access to the 169.63 address for things like DHCP and monitoring. So I have, and that's why I declared that policy. And likewise for the other network groups as well. So with that being said, let's take a quick look at how our Terraform's progressing. And yeah, so basically it's done. I am going to go ahead and copy paste this to the chat window. Just give me a second. And okay, so you should all see it here. Feel free to poke around if you like. The servers that basically say secured by CT are in the microsegment. So you really will not be able to access that. So on the browser, they will actually time out. Whereas the two dev servers that are on there are basically open. And like I said, anybody on the internet can access them, and that includes you as well. Now that this is done, let's go back and see our color master and make sure that our resources have enrolled. So you can see here that I've got all the 5 VMs have basically come online. And the way I define a microsegment is by using tags. And so if you look at the AWS CRM web server, you'll notice that I've actually defined a tag called partner portal. And my microsegment is actually defined around this tag. So basically my microsegment definition says that as long as the server has the tags, the application tag set to partner portal, it automatically becomes a member of that microsegment. And likewise, the production web server on Azure also has the same tag. So basically, these belong to that microsegment. Now let's go back to the visualizer, and let me just refresh this because we have all our resources coming up, and you're already starting to see some traffic lines. I'm going to go ahead and expand the portal microsegment, and you can see that there's the AWS CRM web server and the Azure production web server. So both of these and you saw them in the slides that I showed you. And now the other 3 resources are basically going to be put in this kind of catch-all bucket, if you will. And we automatically group things by subnets. So I'm just going to expand all of these 3 subnets, and then you will basically see all of these. So here's the AWS Dev Web Server, there's the Azure Dev Web Server, and there's the internal AWS CRM database. And so you can see that they're all on different subnets. Obviously, the AWS ones are in the 2 AWS subnets, and the Azure Web Server is back in Azure. Now, the gray lines here actually indicate traffic. Just for simplicity, I'm just going to go ahead and turn off some of these, including the private discovered, so I just have a cleaner image to work with. And what I'm going to do is, so early on I told you, okay, let's assume we've got the firewalls turned off. Let's see what happens. Let me turn on the big bad internet here, and we actually see a bundle of lines. I'm going to expand this, and there you go. So it's hardly been, well, maybe about 5 minutes since I started talking to you guys. We already have 16 subnets on the public internet that are basically bombarding us. And we have a mode called the zero trust mode where we color the lines, and so that actually makes it more interesting. So you can see here now that basically all of these resources on the internet, and let me go ahead and refresh it again and see what happens to the count. Yeah, there you go. It's actually gone up to 27. So it's almost like every second you're getting more and more of the bad guys coming online and basically hitting us. And so all of these servers on the internet are actually hitting the two public-facing servers we have, right? The AWS Dev Server and the Azure Dev Web Server. And the red lines here indicate that this is traffic that's unauthorized. We have no policy that's allowing it. So basically, you see solid lines. And if I hover over these lines, you can actually get to see what kind of traffic they're hitting us with. So here's somebody trying to poke us on the Microsoft DS port. Here's another one on TCP 8088. So these are all either hackers or botnets that are actively trying to finger our resources to see if there are any open ports. And so here's an example of one that's on a 193 subnet on the public internet. It's actually trying to attack both the AWS and the Azure web servers. Now let's take a look at our microsegment up here. So again, you see red lines, but notice that there's one distinction here, that they're actually showing up as dashed red lines. And if you see the summary here, it actually says unauthorized blocked. So what this means is that even though they made an attempt, they were actually blocked internally on the workload itself by color tokens. So even though your firewall was actually turned off on both AWS and Azure, because color tokens is protecting your resources directly at the workload level or at the operating system level, we are actually giving you complete protection. So with that being said, what I'd like to do now is actually go ahead and move on to the next scenario. And before we do that, let me just go ahead and launch the web servers on, or rather the browser on the two web servers. So here's my CRM web server. I'll just open another tab and put this guy up here. Give it a couple of seconds to basically load up. This is the first access into that CRM server, so it basically has to warm up. Okay, there it is. And I'll just go ahead and log in. Okay, and there's my Sugar CRM server. I don't need to remember the password. And I'm going to open another tab and basically show you what the development server looks like. This is basically just running an off-the-shelf Apache server with basically nothing really else on it. Okay, and now this is a server that you should be able to access from your browsers as well. It's on the public internet and really not being protected. Now, this, on the other hand, the CRM is something that you probably are not going to see because you are not part of the partner network that I've allowed. So with that, let's move on to the next segment. And in the next demo, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you a live example of a lateral attack. And this is one of the things that hackers do as part of an advanced persistent threat. Now, typically, these could last for from maybe a few hours to several days or months. As Mukul said, you may actually have exposure for several months, 6 months or longer. And so the hackers have a lot of time to basically get to know your system and before they actually get detected. So what we're going to do in this scenario is obviously we are using the same lab. So we have the microsegment, and which is protecting the CRM web server and the production web server. And I'm looking at this diagram and saying, well, I don't really need to worry about my database server because it's on the inside. It is being protected by, from the public internet by my web server, which itself is protected. So I guess I'm pretty good with it. But here's what's happening, right? So the dev web server here is actually left open. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pretend to be a hacker down here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to the development web server, which I just did a few seconds ago. And given enough time, I may be able to find a vulnerability in, say, Apache, and basically upload some type of a web shell. And in the interest of time, obviously, I'm going to fast forward all of this. I've already done this. I've basically deposited a web shell on this web server. And the next thing I'm going to do as a hacker is I'm going to start poking around. And the favorite tool of hackers, as you know, is Nmap. So I'm going to use Nmap and kind of just poke around inside AWS and see what else I can find. And as soon as I find, you'll notice that I will be able to find the CRM database server, and then I'm going to be able to connect to it. And again, given enough time and maybe a sloppy administrator, I may be able to figure out your password to a database admin account, log in, and then basically start exfiltrating data directly back to my hacking workstation. And let's go ahead and do this. And then I'm going to show you how we can protect this using color tokens microsegmentation. So let's switch to this is the web page that you'll see on the development web server. Now you can obviously follow along as to what I'm doing, but just for the sake of making sure that we don't get on each other's toes, if you could refrain from doing what I'm doing, that'd be greatly appreciated. So as I mentioned, I've already uploaded a web shell, and I'm just going to activate that. And so I'm now basically on the box, even though I'm basically sitting at my laptop, and I can get a secure console to that web server. And let me just zoom this in so it's easier for you to see the commands I'm going to run. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is, so I've gotten out of the box, I'm going to start looking around. So let me run ifconfig. I can see that I'm on a 10.0.0 network, and common to most Amazon best practices, people will put their internal subnets on a slightly different address range, and I'm going to start poking around. Now, again, in the interest of time, I'm going to basically poke around specifically for a small subnet, which is where I've put my database. So let me run an nmap on 10.0.1.0/28, so I don't have to scan too many hosts, because nmap can take a few minutes. Now, this one's really fast. It was just scanning 16 hosts. And you can see here that I actually found my database server, the 10.0.1.5. It's got SSH open, and it's got MySQL open. So as a hacker, I'm going to say, well, that's nice. I found a MySQL server. Let me see if I can actually try and connect to it and see what I can find. So the first thing I'll probably do is try to see what kind of application is running on this. And again, we make the assumption that I've spent enough time here to basically hack my way into the password. So I'm going to basically connect to this now. And as the admin, let's go in as root. And I've hacked the password here. And I'm going to look at what databases are on this thing. Show databases. And OK, so I see Sugar CRM. So I say to myself, so this is running basically a CRM system. So obviously, it's got interesting customer information that I can basically grab and maybe resell on the back web. So what I'm going to do now is basically, let's go ahead and try to steal some information, right? So let me see if I can move up a second. And instead of show databases, now I'm going to do a select star. I just basically looked at the Sugar CRM data schema. It's all open source. And the database is sugarcrm.leads. And let's run that. And there you go. So I've got all the customer information that I've just stolen. And now, obviously, here I'm sitting on a browser, and so I can only see a few screens at a time. But in real life, I would basically be running something like a Python script and just kind of sucking data, every few kilobytes at a time, spread it out over several days, so you have no idea what's going on. So here's an example of how I was able to basically completely bypass the protections that you had and kind of go sideways, or this is why it's called a lateral attack, where I went in through another web server and went sideways or laterally to your database. Now, how do you prevent this? Actually, before we get there, let's see if color tokens can actually find this out. So let's go ahead and refresh this. And so here are a couple of interesting things. So when I actually logged into the CRM database the right way, I actually came in from here. So that's the green line that basically was from my machine here. So I'm probably, let's see. So that's me here. That's my address, 24. I'm on a 24.0 subnet. So I came into the CRM web server, and then from there, the CRM web server made a connection to the database. This was an authorized connection, as per the policy. So it's basically colored in green. So this is a normal path. Now, this here is basically the hack that I just did. Let me get this out of the way and just zoom in again, so it makes it easier for you to see. Now, you see this line here? This is basically what I was just doing. I came in from the development web server, and when I ran nmap, basically it was just, blasting its way through all the hosts on the subnet, attacking or trying to basically find open ports. And eventually, this is what I used to basically exfiltrate into the database. So now what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and basically include this as part of the microsegment as well, so that this one is also protected. And to do that, all I'm going to do is, I mentioned before that we do microsegment using tags. So I'm going to select the CRM database server here. And right now, it's not in any tag. And I'm just going to go ahead and basically say that this guy also belongs to the partner portal application. And that's it. So once I do that, let's go back to the visualizer, refresh, and you will now see that my microsegment here, the portal microsegment, now has my database server inside as well. So now this is going to be protected also. And let's just make sure that this is actually working. So I'm not going to, you don't have to believe me. I'll actually try this. So what I'm going to do now is let's run that nmap scan again. Just give it a few seconds to run. And you see that basically it said it's completed and it found nothing up, right? So basically what happened was this is the exact same hacker at the exact same development web server. But now that I've enforced protection, I'm not able to see this. It's almost like that server's actually been cloaked and kind of made invisible. And I could also try a ping. I'll just try a single ping. I'll put a timeout of 2 seconds so we don't keep waiting forever. And 10.0.1.5. And again, you see, it's 100% packet loss. So I'm not able to even ping that server. And obviously, if I actually try to run that exfiltration command that we did before, this is not going to work. So over here, you'll have to trust me that I hit the return key, and I'm basically going to get nothing. The way this WSO shell works is it's going to wait for up to a minute before it times out and tells me that the command failed. So we don't have to wait that long. So I think with that, we've kind of covered both of these. I hope I didn't scare you too much with the first one, but really you should be scared because as you saw, within minutes, it didn't even take an hour. In 10 minutes, we were basically bombarded with things on the public network. And I'm just curious. So we were 29 before. I'm going to hit refresh again, and we're at 31. So it's basically starting to tick up. And if you come back here tomorrow, this number is probably going to be in the hundreds. So with that, I'm going to kind of transition back to Mukul for some closing thoughts, and we will, of course, be ready for your Q&A as well. Mukul, you can take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Venki, very much for this very interesting and insightful demo. Okay, so apart from what Venki just covered from a key use case perspective, I would just like to highlight the fact that color tokens can solve a couple of more use cases, and I would like to spend a minute or two highlighting them. So the first one is granular visibility. So granular visibility should be the foundation of any cybersecurity strategy. So with color tokens, we can provide visibility across your hybrid data center. It could be applications running on your bare metal server or in a hybrid cloud environment. It could be your workloads, processes, network. We can give granularity at any level that you desire. There is east-west or cross-segment traffic visibility that we provide. We can audit policy violations. You can also compute residual risk. This is very interesting because this is like a custom developed multi-dimensional risk metric by color token, where we can help you identify high risk assets, and based on your cybersecurity resources, you can prioritize more efficiently. The other important feature that you get with visibility is the asset inventory. Now, a lot of compliance requires you to provide reports on where all your PCI DSS data is flowing within the network. So you can look at the compliance traffic very easily through this asset inventory. The second key use case that we address is of microsegmentation, which Venki very beautifully covered in the last few minutes. So one is APT prediction and mitigation. The second is the DevSecOps. And one thing very interesting that I would like to highlight is that color tokens is completely vendor agnostic. We are completely platform independent. We do not require our customers to make any additional investment in hardware. There is absolutely no upgrades required here, and we will, our products work with any type of solutions. The third use case that we address as a company is microsegmented applications need to be protected, to ensure that the right users have, the authorized access. So the secure user access offering comes in at this place, and we have taken microsegmentation to granular user level where you can completely control the applications that are being accessed by your office campus users or by your remote users. The user access remains the same, the privileges remain the same without having to deal with traditional remote access technologies. The other critical use case that we address today is from a compliance standpoint. One quick example here would be for PCI DSS, organizations who are worried about the status of their PCI DSS compliance. They would agree that CDE, which is the cardholder data environment, needs to be isolated. There needs to be, proper auditing of, what type of traffic is flowing within the CDE environment, as well as who's trying to connect to this environment and what type of information is being exchanged. So color tokens can help you achieve that with ease. And how we do that is by providing color tokens, unified security platform. And there are a couple of components in the platform, starting with unified threat visibility and analytics. So this is our visibility platform backed up by very strong analytics capability. And as mentioned earlier, we help you provide residual risk for critical assets, which will help you further go ahead and improve the security posture and secure these critical infrastructure much quickly. Once you have seen the traffic flow, the patterns, you can use micro-segmentation, which is intent-based enforcement. You can use software-defined policies and enforce them to ensure that the micro-segments are completely safe and isolated and only authorized users can access them. Again, I would like to reiterate that we are completely platform independent and vendor agnostic. We do not require you to make any type of investments in hardware. We're a completely software driven company. The other element is of user segmentation. Now, there is a very interesting use case for your supply chain partners as well as users when they move from office campus to a coffee shop, or when they are traveling to an airport, right? They will need access. Now, traditional access policies, remote access controls rather, and technologies, they provide IP level access, but we do not do that. We provide only the applications that are needed to be accessed by these authorized users. So we are, approaching at the top of the hour, and these are some of the key slides that we wanted to cover, as well as the amazing demo from Venki. So we would like to open it for questions and any comments from Venki or Sudesh that you would like to make.
So can you please give us some awards and recognitions which you received recently?
Sure. Sure, that's a very interesting point that you bring up, Sudesh. So thanks for bringing up. So Color Tokens as a company has recently received Information Security Award from Cyber Defense Magazine, which is a reputed publication followed by a lot of C-level executives in the cybersecurity space. And we have received awards in 6 different categories, and I'm extremely proud about it. We have received award for Next Generation Security Company of the Year, the innovative product that we have in micro-segmentation space, the application security, cloud security, the data center security market again, and the endpoint security. We have received awards in these 6 different categories, and I think the Color Tokens management would be receiving this award in the US in the RSA conference on 4th of March. So that should be happening sometime today in the US. Aside that, the company has published a lot of, thought leadership articles, which you can see on the right side of the slide, which has been published by leading publications. So, so the product has been, received very good recognition from the industry, and the thought leaders that we have in the company are helping shape the different cyber defense technologies for the future. So, any other questions?
Hi, Shiva here from Dimension Data. Hope you are able to hear me.
Yes.
I have a few questions, Venki. The first thing is the use case. What you have showed is typically on the cloud-based environment, right? Can this be replicated over a LAN? And if it can be replicated over a LAN, I assume that the Color Master, whatever you have, is a portal-based or it's a cloud-based SaaS model. Can that be replicated on a LAN environment also as a segmentation gateway typically? This is the first question.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, let me take that. So the yes, you can definitely run this on-prem as well. The only reason I chose clouds was just it was a lot easier for me to kind of deal with public infrastructure rather than use our internal data center and do firewall pinholes. But the SaaS offering, which is our preferred offering, there are a few customers who, for various reasons, are not willing to or cannot go to the cloud. So in those situations, we do offer an on-prem solution as well.
All right. So the use case, again, coming back, is more of a web-based application. So what about the network share, file share, and things like that? Is there a jump server kind of a concept, or how do we do it?
Actually, so I basically did a demonstration using web servers and a database server, but really you can protect just about any workload. So typically what we see in terms of workloads are, obviously web servers. We do have file servers. We have application servers, for example, something like SharePoint. We also see companies protecting Active Directory and domain controllers. So really, you can protect just about any workload.
Fair enough. Coming to the security part, see, typically in any client environment, before even they adopt to a zero trust framework, they already have security postures in place, like endpoint DLP and things like that. So what are the integration parameters, or are there any integration slides which shows these are the partners whom you? Yes, Mahesh did mention that you pretty well integrate with most of the OEMs. But is there a slide which can give me a clarity in terms of who are all the integration partners whom you're currently working with, and any typical use cases basis that, maybe from an endpoint side, maybe from a network admission control side, because these are the entry points for any clients, right? Because there could be roaming users, there could be BYOD users. So how do we handle these kind of, are there any use cases for these things as well?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. So I guess the simple answer is that for the most part, we really bring in a new level of security with zero trust. So we don't really displace or upset anything that you're already using. Now, for certain specific instances, we can actually interwork or basically take advantage of what's already there. So, for example, Mukul talked about a risk posture. So in our dashboard. And so when we do that, we compute the overall risk by looking at a number of factors. And one of them is any existing CVSS score, for example, for a resource. So if your client's running Nessus or Qualys or any of these other popular scanners, then we could actually integrate with those. In fact, we have basic built-in integration for these scanners, so we can actually pull in scores from there. Another integration would be for user access, and Mukul talked about that. Obviously, we don't want to build a directory server because Microsoft's already built a fantastic one. So we basically let you integrate into Active Directory. And if you're using single sign-on using either a SAML or ADFS, we can integrate with those as well. So we offer integration points via standardized protocols. Now, on a per company integration, it really depends on how big the opportunity is, or how big the client is, and if there's anything really custom, that's something that we could definitely look at.
All right. So when it comes to Nexus from outside,
can I add here? Sorry,
yep.
This is Sunil here from Color Tokens. I'm a product manager. Just to add to Venki's comments, the couple of other things that we also did in the latest release is to integrate with threat feed and IP reputations services, right? So we've now integrated with Alien Vault as well as with Bright Cloud, right? So Webroot Bright Cloud. So what that gives you is an ability to actually in one place understand, okay, not just that this is talking outside my organization, but to also understand what is the reputation of that destination or the source that is talking with my, let's say, production database, for example, right? So that integration we actually put in place just recently as well. The second thing we also did was provide an ability southbound API to actually take all our logs and push it into a theme like Splunk, for example, where you could do offline analysis if you wanted, or to keep longer history of logs and things like that. So multiple integrations are now available, and we can definitely talk through them in more detail in following conversations.
Great. So one more question is, let's say if I'm a roaming user, I'm accessing a couple of my cloud applications through some means, right? So typically, is there, when I implement your solution, Kalamaster, is there changes to be done on the endpoint side? Because I don't think so there would be any agents, because from a zero trust framework, deploying agents would not be the right solution, right approach. Uh, so will there be any changes required on the end user side?
You mentioned you were accessing cloud applications. So could you give us an example of? So are you talking about an employee laptop maybe going to say Office 365 or?
Yeah, could be that. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So that's actually not one of our core use cases. So you're talking about direct access to something like Office 365, where something like a CASB would be the preferred solution. We're really talking about in-house systems and applications. So applications that you host, whether it's on the company's cloud or it's on their on-prem data center, and it's protecting the workloads that the company manages or the enterprise is managing, not say Microsoft's workloads.
Could be, because see, when I talk about a client, they might have different workloads, right? Could be O365, could be one of the use case. There might be workloads on Azure or any other cloud providers. So definitely most of the clients today already have adopted to a CASB kind of a solution. So again, the integration comes in picture here also, right? So for an end user, if I'm a roaming user, I just connect to my workloads. I try to access. How easy or how difficult for me to deploy the solution, or what are all the kind of changes would be required from an end user perspective, or it's just there are no changes at all?
Okay. No, so from an end user perspective or from an employee perspective, the only thing is that, I mean, that laptop is ostensibly being managed by the enterprise, so they would deploy the agent on there. And for systems where you absolutely cannot deploy agents, we actually have a solution called a CT bridge. And so as long as you're sitting behind the CT bridge basically becomes a proxy for that resource. Now, the one other thing I do want to bring up is you mentioned, let's say it's workloads on Azure, and they are using CASB just to protect access to Azure. Actually, the bigger problem today is not the north-south direction, but it's really east-west. So think about the infrastructure inside Azure. So obviously, there's a web server that they're talking to. That's the front end. But then there's a lot happening behind the scenes. So they have application servers, all kinds of business logic systems, databases, and so on. And the percentage of east-west versus the north-south or the inbound perimeter is already at, like, I think it was 75% a couple of years ago. It's actually fast approaching 80, 85%. So the bigger threat is really inside the infrastructure, and these could be not necessarily malicious employees, but basically employees that might have been taken advantage of through phishing or any of these other techniques. And so the hacker's already inside your network. And so CASB is really ineffective there. It's not really designed for that. So I really look at these as complementary solutions. CASB is something we look at purely for accessing a third-party cloud-based service. But if you're looking at protecting your own infrastructure, especially east-west inside your infrastructure, that's really where Color Tokens gives you the ultimate protection, and at the lowest possible TCO, because as Mukul mentioned, we have no additional hardware. It's just running on your infrastructure.
Venki, sorry to disturb you. It means if we say Color Token, we have a space only for when we talk about any public cloud, that is for infra as a service or a platform as a service. We are nowhere for the SaaS platform, right?
I'm sorry. What was was that a question or a comment? I didn't quite get it.
I just want to make this clear. See, when we say Color Token, we have a space only for when we talk about a public cloud, right, it's only for infra as a service and a platform as a service. We are nowhere when we talk about SaaS as a service when right.
Oh, I see what you mean. So if you're looking at a third party, yeah. So for example, if you're to make a distinction with this, say Azure as an example. So if the enterprise is using Azure for their own applications, so either say something like PaaS or IaaS, then yes, you would use color tokens because you manage the infrastructure. It's your workload. But if you're using Office 365, then your association with Azure is pretty much non-existent, right? I mean, I could buy Office 365 and I have no idea that it's even running on Azure. I just look at Office 365.
If I'm using O365, Azure will only come in picture when I will be going with AD as a service from Azure. Otherwise, there will be no role from Azure when I will be on O365.
That is correct. And again, maybe I'm diverging here, but again, if for AD, if you buy Azure AD, then again, it's SaaS. But if you're basically deploying your Windows virtual machine in Azure and running Active Directory, then you can definitely protect that with color tokens.
Agreed, totally agreed. When I will go for a Azure AD as a service, then you will not come into picture because that will be also again a SaaS. If I spin up a server and host my AD there, then color token will come into picture because that will be inside service or a platform as a service.
Right. Yeah. Any place where you're managing, whether it's a bare metal host or it's a a virtualization platform or it's a VM or a container, that's something that you can protect with color tokens.
Okay. Great. Thank you for clearing me up.
Sure.
The question, Uma Shankar here. See, when it comes to solutions like CyberArk, it's a focused privileged identity management solution, more from a overall application point of view, right? So the kind of granular control which CyberArk provides, of course, it's doing based on a specific temporary check-in and check-out login credentials. We have a different approach to the same. We are basically today capable of doing attribute-based authentication. So I wouldn't say that we replace PIM as of now, because PIM is more for tracking the admin or the privileged accounts.
If you use color token, can you use as IDAM also? Do they have their local database also, or every time we have to integrate with existing LDAP or a AAA server?
So we are not a replacement of identity access management solution today. Okay. We can leverage the single sign-on agent on the machine to do a transparent authentication or a federated identity on your applications. So we can leverage.
I got the answer.
Yeah, thank you.
If you're doing a very small deployment, or especially if it's a POC, the Color Master does offer its own identity management. But that's really more for proof of concepts where they say, well, okay, this is good, we want to try it out, but I don't want you to hook up to my AD or something like that. But otherwise, like Uma Shankar said, we really, we don't want to be an IDAM. We are basically a security product.
Venki, one quick question here is, how do you compare this with Cisco DO security or Centrify technologies?
With Centrify?
Yeah.
Well, again,
hi there, this is Martha here. For any competitive queries, I would strongly recommend that you connect offline with the number and the email address mentioned. We would not be able to answer any competitive queries on a webinar.
Sure, no problem.
Venki, we have another question which is from Vineet in the chat. Do we need to install agent to secure my devices?
Yes, the answer is yes. So any system that you want to actually protect, you basically install a very lightweight agent on it. That being said, in terms of visualizing your network, you don't really need to have agents on everything. As long as you have agents on the devices you want to protect, we will basically discover everything else around you and also be able to set up policies where you can have a policy that says, things from this network or this subnet can access my protected resource, or vice versa. My protected resource can access these networks or subnets. But the resource that you want to protect itself is something that you'd have to install the agent on. Now, the agent itself is extremely lightweight, and actually, this is a great question. We are not actually reinventing the wheel here in terms of providing the OS level protection or the container level protection. We are actually leveraging whatever is already on the operating system. So for all operating systems, whether it's Linux, Windows, or Mac OS, we are leveraging the built-in firewall or net filter roles tables and actually just programming them on the fly. And our value is really in orchestrating all of these things, making it super simple for you to basically configure these host-based firewalls without having to do this on a node-by-node basis. So the agent is extremely lightweight. Basically, all it's doing is programming the firewall and then reporting telemetry data.
So just to add to that, I mean, think about it this way. When you're trying to enforce any kind of network level controls, it is best if you have agents on both sides. Let's say server A and server B, and we want server A to only receive HTTPS connection from server B. And this is the rule that you want to enforce. And if you have the agent on both sides, we'll make sure that both are tightly coupled that way. But if you have agent on only one side, we'll at least make sure, let's say it's only installed on server A, we can say only receive incoming calls from server B on HTTPS port, right? So that we could only enforce on one side. So as long as you have it on at least one of the sides, you'll be able to enforce the policies.
You can take out your camera and take a picture of this particular slide. You can contact umashankar.nv@colortokens.com. He's our senior sales engineer. His mobile number is mentioned, and it would be great to hear back from you, both in terms of feedback on the product, as well as if there are any opportunities that we could work together. So, Sudesh, Venki, any concluding statements from you folks?
No, just thank you all for joining in, and hope the demo was useful for you.
Right.
So let us conclude this session. Hope the session was very useful for you guys. You got a chance to witness the capabilities of color tokens to enforce a zero trust on workloads. So probably we'll come back to you with the new webinar, which will be announced very shortly.